Good morning and welcome to Murder Mystery Monday. Today hits kind of close to home. We are talking about something that happened in Gallant, Alabama, which is about 10 to 15 minutes away from Springville. And we're talking about an old history of back in 1836 era during the war. And we're talking about a man named Jacob Lutes. Jacob Lutes. This is him back in 1910. And here's a picture of him with some other men from that time period. Now, I do not own the rights to these pictures. These are available to anybody offline. You can print it out and check it out and see. This is his enlistment certificate, which is dated in 1862, and then he re-enlisted again in 1864, a month after he finished his first enlistment. But I'm going to tell you about him. Jacob Lutes was born on February the 19th of 1836 in Lafayette, Georgia. Now, he was the son of George Lutes, who was born in 1793, and of Mary Steele. Now, Lutes later moved with his father to Cherokee County just prior to 1850, where the younger Lutes met his first cousin, Sarah Elizabeth Steele, the daughter of Olivia Steele and Susanna Lutes. Now, Jacob married Sarah on January the 12th, 1860. Now, this was not uncommon back then. Being first cousin, usually you say second or third, but this was common back then. He didn't live anywhere near, but he was related. They settled on Chandler Mountain near Gallant, just a few miles from Steele. And if you go down Highway 11 out of Springville, and you take a left and get like you're going up toward the mountain in Blount County, you will take a right onto Gallant, and that will take you all the way into Gallant. That's also where I told you about the Greasy Cove General Store. That's a really nice little place to shop for produce and everything. But Steele's not very far from that as well, and Chandler Mountain's not far from that either. And it's all located close to Horsepits 40, if you know where that is. Well, the town of Steele was named after Olivia Steele, which was the name of Sarah Elizabeth Steele's mom. Now, Jacob married Sarah on January the 12th, 1860. Again, like I said, they settled on Chandler Mountain near Gallant, just a few miles from Steele. Jacob purchased 186 acres of land and had started clearing the land for farming when the Civil War started. Now, Jacob enlisted in the Confederate Army in 1862 and served until the end of the war in 1865. Now, during his tour of duty, Jacob saw action at the Battle of Murfreesboro, Chickamauga, Missionary Ridge, and Atlanta. He entered the Confederate Army from Asheville and was assigned to Company E, 19th Alabama Regiment until the fall of 1864. Now, after Jacob's enlistment ended, like I told you about on the paper, he re-enlisted a month later in the John Hatone Command, Hatone Command. Now, Jacob began working and building as soon as he arrived home from the war. He built a grist mill, a blacksmith shop, and a coffin factory. His chief crops, of course, though, were tobacco and corn. He also later built a sawmill and produced most of the lumber for the community. Now, Jacob became very financially successful over the years, began lending money to other farmers to finance their crops. He kept large sums of money in his house due to the poor performance of the bank during that era. Now, most banks in this era and other eras of the South had a life expectancy of only 1 to 2 years, and mostly opened by what they call scallywags or northern investors. Now, Lutes was one of the wealthiest men in this section at the time, and his main business was loaning money. He kept no bank account, however. Jacob contributed the land for the First Baptist Church of Attala, and was a devoted member of that church. And most of you know Attala is close to Rainbow City. Now, Jacob lost his wife Sarah in 1887, and she's buried in the Steele Cemetery. He was remarried in 1898, so 11 years later, to Marcella Phillips. She was a widow from Cherokee County. Now, the couple had one child in 1899 and named her Priscilla. Now, Jacob's son, Montrose, brought his 3 children to live with Jacob and Marcella until he could make better arrangements. Montrose's wife, Daisy, had died while giving birth to his son, Leroy, in September of that year in Memphis, Tennessee. Now, stories handed down over the years indicate that Jacob and his wife were abusive to the children. We don't know. Because of the timing and all, we just don't know. Now, Montrose's mother-in-law, Henrietta Lovett, came to Steele from Georgia on a train and took Leroy and his two sisters back to Georgia with her. Now, Leroy was sick with dysentery, and it took several weeks of care to nurse him back to health. The Lutes had a daughter that was away at school in Atlanta, which turned out to be the blessing that may have saved her life. On Friday morning, November the 10th, 1911, guys, some neighbors, failing to find the old couple about the house, held a boy up to the Lutes' window. He saw the old man and woman lying on the floor, covered in blood, and their heads had been split open with an axe. The community was thrown into a state of wild excitement. Several hundred men, many armed, immediately arrived at the scene of the crime. This was big business back then. Nobody killed anybody really in this area. It's the first wave of crime that they really had. Empty pocketbooks were found in the death chamber. The rooms were in great disorder, and keys were also missing. 4 chairs were drawn up in the front of the fireplace, indicating that at least 2 men had been admitted into the home and sat before the fireplace before making the attack. The fireplace showed evidence of rain that fell on the previous Wednesday. Therefore, the deed could not have been committed later than Tuesday night. The calendar clock has stopped at 6:15, and the calendar hand pointed to Monday, November the 6th. So it was thought that the Lutes would not allow their clock to go unwound for even a day. The section of Etowah County that the Lutes lived in was isolated and sparsely settled, y'all. So no outcries would have been heard by any of the neighbors. And this is Gallant and St. Clair County and Etowah County, they run parallel to each other. And you just keep driving and it runs into Etowah County. Now, on February the 2nd, 1912, brothers Cleve and Will Campbell, along with D.S. McLean, were arrested and carried to Birmingham for safekeeping. They later were brought to the home place to tell where the hatchet and the keys were located. Jacob's daughter, Mary, hired a private detective who worked for $25 a day plus expenses. He found enough evidence to convict the Campbell brothers. The axe that was used as the murder weapon was found in nearby Canoe Creek. Although Cleve Campbell was convicted of the murders, he later was released with Doc McLemore confessed to the murder on his deathbed. The Campbell brothers were paid compensation for their time that they had spent in prison, and Jacob was buried in the Steele Cemetery next to his first wife, Sarah. Now during all this time, it's not said for sure. People think that the Campbells, Doc McLemore, and all of them were guilty. And in the court testimony, Mr. Wiggins recounted his version of events leading to the double murder. According to the detective, the Campbells, McLeans, McLemores, and Knights all colluded on a plan to rob Lutes. Now, when the possibility of killing the couple was discussed, Knight and McLemore backed out of the plan. It was McLemore that would confess to the planned robbery, though, and details of the murder. Now, when the 3 trials began in Asheville Courthouse, here in Asheville, Alabama, in the spring of 1913, McLemore was one of the state's star witnesses. McLemore told the court of meeting Will Campbell in Attala a few weeks after the murders. They said, "Do you know Cleve and Bud and me are being accused of killing old man Lutes?" Campbell allegedly asked him after a few drinks. "A detective is down at the depot now. They convict us as sure as heck. The first SOB that accuses me, I'll kill him," he said, "and I've got a good rifle at home." Other witnesses swore to seeing Will Campbell on a stolen horse riding from the Lutes home the night of the murder. So the Campbells were also overheard bragging about having money to burn after the crime. Despite the lack of evidence linking any of the 3 defendants to the murders, all were found guilty and, of course, given those life sentences. And like I said, on McLemore's deathbed in October of 1931, He confessed, and that confession swept through Etowah, St. Clair County. Like I said, Greasy Cove is in St. Clair County, but there's a fine line there between Gallant and Steele running into Etowah County. Now, Will Campbell escaped from prison back in 1916 and remained a fugitive until 1930. During his years of freedom, he volunteered for service in the World War I and saw action in France and spent time in Mexico, and he received parole in 1932. Now, Jacob and Marcella Lutes' daughter, Celia Washburn, she remained convinced that the Campbell brothers and McLean murdered her parents. However, Washburn recalled in 1932 Birmingham News Age Herald article that shortly before the murders, Macklemore told her it was dangerous for her parents to live alone and to keep large sums of money in their home. And word got out, and I guess those people plotted. Steve Wiggins never wavered from his belief that the crime he solved all those years earlier had been committed by the trio that had been tried and convicted by a jury of their peers. For others around Chandler Mountain, though, the jury was still out. They just don't know. But the rumors still, this is something that's been told and retold over and over again and passed down through history. So if you're looking to look at it and find information on it, you can find information through the Gadsden Library website. You can go online and type the Lutes murders or murder on Chandler Mountain, Gallant murders. That's how I found out about it, is I thought that I would check out and see, because I was telling y'all about Greasy Cove General Store. I thought, well, why don't we start telling some murder mystery stories closer to home? So this is going to be our first of the series of doing some stories close to this area. But like I said, you can check out the pictures and different things you can find online and see what you think. They were hardworking men, and just very interesting that it's a story close to home. So I hope you've had a wonderful Murder Mystery Monday. And like I said, this was the Greasy Cove Vagabond murder. And as always, if you're going to hide money, don't tell people you got a lot of money at your house. Keep that secret. If you use a bank, that's great too. But be cautious, be careful, be aware of your surroundings. That's something to get from all of this. And I hope y'all have a wonderful week.